Hey Chubbs, do you want to play pinball? You want to play pinball? You want to play pinball? Let's go play pinball. Yeah, you want to play pinball?
Ever since I was a young boy, I played the silver ball. From Soho down to Brighton, I must have played them all. I ain't seen nothing like him in any amusement hall. That deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays mean pinball. He stands like a statue, becomes part of the machine, feeling all the bumpers, always playing clean. Plays by intuition, the digit counters fall. That deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays mean pinball. He's a pinball wizard, there has to be a twist. A pinball wizard's got such a supple wrist. I don't know what makes him so good. Ain't got no distractions, can't hear no buzzing bells, don't see no lights are flashing, plays by sense of smell. Always gets a replay, never tilts at all. That deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays me pinball. Thanks.
Greetings to the crew of the Gaia Navigation Experiment, to friends and students scattered across space and time, and anyone else who cares to listen. This is, once again, your Nav speaking on the 13th of July, 2012, Friday the 13th. And your Nav, of course, is John Lash. I want to say again, as I've said many times, that the Nav briefings and a great deal of other material in the Gaia Navigation Experiment is presented, received, and processed within strict time parameters in sync to real-time events. So, for instance, today I'm recording on the day of an apogee surge. There's an apogee surge of the moon at 20 degrees of Taurus today, Friday the 13th. 20 degrees of Taurus or 50 degrees of ecliptic longitude is still before the pentagrammic constellation of stars representing the satanic mask of Cetus, but it's moved away from a lock-in position to the gaze of Cetus and a lock-in position to the back brain of the Cetus / Archon / aromatic monster. So we know that this indicates that we are moving out of a stall and things are breaking loose all over the place. Even though I'm recording this talk in real time right now, and even though the parameters of this talk are uniquely relevant to the moment in which it's made, this talk is an enduring chronicle of our experiment with Gaia navigation. And so those who come later, or yourselves at a later time, a month, a year, 5 years from now, can listen to this talk as a chronicle of a great adventure undertaken by a few brave and inspired people on the planet Earth at a moment when the Earth was facing one of the most terrible crises in its long history as a laboratory for the human experiment. Title of this talk today is Dakini Pinball.
Hey, Chubbs.
I'd like to cover a couple of things. I'm not going to be talking about recent subjects, which I'll pick up again soon, recent themes, but rather to concentrate on the theme of Dakini instruction in the Shakti cluster. I'd like to see if I can make it more user-friendly. And I'd also like to point out some of the benefits and kicks of the practice of Dakini transception in planetary Tantra. Before I launch into a Nahualesque description of Dakini Pinball, I'd like to indicate some current observations regarding the astronomy of the GNE, the real-time astronomy, and also to put out a request to the crew for a little favor. You know, I said in a recent talk that we are witnesses to the Nahual of the wisdom goddess. In astronomical terms, that means witnesses to the unique, original, and novel immediacy of the cosmos at every single moment. It's only in the archonic paradigm, in the mental funk of the archontic paradigm, that we are falsely induced into thinking that everything is regular, everything is predictable in the cosmos. And the reality is that the cosmic order is infinitely variable. It's full of change and novelty. You know, you could go back and try to calculate, you could take the cycle of Jupiter around the Earth or around the Sun. You could compute it geocentrically or heliocentrically. And then you could compare that cyclic period of Jupiter, which is about a little under 12 years, to the 8.5-year cycle of the rotation of the lunar apsides. And then you could sit down with a pencil and a calculator and just work out how the two cycles would be coordinated. You could work out that, the combination, the coincidence of those two cycles and how they lapse into synchronicity and lapse out again. You know, an 11.8-year cycle roughly, contrasted to something like an 8.5-year cycle. And then you could come up with, an archonically framed prediction of the next time that the apogee of the moon and Jupiter would encounter each other. And that calculation would be relatively worthless. What's really interesting is to observe it in real time as it happens. And as you're doing so, to let the fact register on your mind that this is only happening once in this very unique way right now. You know, there may be other moments in time when the apogee of the moon and Jupiter would do a tango dance with each other. But at what other moment in time would they do it between the Pleiades and the star Aldebaran in the eye of the bull? At what other time would they do it in conjunction with a remarkable retrograde cycle of Venus, tracing both horns of the bull as it makes a double rendezvous with Jupiter? You're going to go look through the entire range of scientific astronomical data projected by archontic calculating devices, and you will not ever, ever find another time when this happened in the past or will happen in the future. Now, having ragged on your first attention sufficiently with all this astronomical data, I want to conclude by making an observation regarding interaction with the dakinis.
Hey, Chubbs.
That is to say, the elementary practice of using the Shakti cluster, working with the Shakti cluster. Following the lunar shifts each month is a fascinating exercise, needless to say. Now that I have laid out the complete nomenclature of the 18 channels, some of you who haven't been too inclined to this practice might feel a little more comfortable with it. That's just the intention of this talk, and others as well. And I would like to explain to you why we need this complex network of dakini frequencies in order to navigate with the planetary animal mother. It's rather as if your mind was a pinball machine. Consider that for a moment, that your mind works like a pinball machine. Now, a pinball machine has a platform, as you know, a horizontal platform. It's usually tilted, sloping slightly upward. And then it has a vertical part which has the score on it, shows the score and shows various other readings of the game as you proceed. Down at the right-hand corner of the horizontal part of the pinball machine is the pin. It's a sprocketed pin. You pull it back, you retract the spring, a silver ball drops into the funnel, you let go of the pin, and it ejects the ball into the machine. And then what happens? Well, the structure of a pinball machine, of a field, the field of play as it were, consists of two parts. One is the holes, the places where the pinball, the places the pinball goes into, the pockets as it were, equivalent to the pockets on a pool table. And pockets have different values. So some pockets, you get the pinball into one pocket and you get 20 points, and another pocket you might get 200 points. Additional to the pockets, there are the bumpers. The bumpers are these columns that stand up, and they have a rubber rim around them. And they are really critical to the game, because by slightly shifting the pinball machine back and forth with your hands, but not shifting it so far that you tilt it, you can influence the ball as it ricochets among the different areas of the field of play. As you jostle the table, the console of the pinball machine, back and forth slightly, with the palm of your hand, sometimes maybe even jouncing it with your hip, as a sexy and skilled pinball player will do, you actually maintain the momentum of the pinball as it's ricocheting between the various posts or rubberized turrets, as it were, that are in the field of play. And this is how you play pinball. And each time you hit a turret, the machine rings, you ring up a score, and you watch the vertical panel of the pinball machine to see the scores you're making. So you get, 5 balls to a game. They come out of the spring-loaded sprocket with a tremendous speed. Then they bounce around in the console. Some of them go down into different pockets. That's the end of the game for that particular pinball. And others ricochet wildly among the turrets, each hit causing an amplification of velocity of the pinball and ringing up a score. So there it is. There's a simple, straightforward description of how pinball works. But it could as well be a description of how your mind works, insofar as your mind is a field of play for Dakini instruction.
Hey, Chubbs.
There's a principle in the term of Gaia Awakening that says, samsara and this enlightenment have the same look. Now, another way to put that is to say that your ordinary mind is the Buddha mind, and vice versa. That was the way it was said in the past. I think, however, that to repeat that Chan and Zen teaching today, it would be wise to add a particular nuance. Your ordinary mind and the Buddha mind are the same when your ordinary mind is realized in its subliminal operations. But if your ordinary mind is only realized in its ordinary operations, then you're not really in the enlightenment of your mind. The thinking of the Dakinis, if you want to call it thinking, is constantly operating in your mind, right now, as you're listening to my words. The pristine cognition of the Dakinis, as the Tibetans call it, is a spontaneous upsurge of the enlightened mind into the ordinary mind. I prefer to call this operation of Dakini thinking subliminal, because it is at a level just below the threshold of your ordinary awareness. If you need some kind of analogy or concrete metaphor to grasp how the Dakini thinking enters your mind, your ordinary mind, then just think of the pinball launching device. When you stand there to begin a game of pinball, you put in some money and 4 or 5 balls are loaded into the chamber of the pinball console. When you pull back the plunger, one of those balls drops into position at the head of the plunger, and when you let the plunger go, bingo, at very high velocity, that pinball is ejected into the gameplay field of the console. Just so, at every instant, every single instant of your conscious awareness, and likewise at every instant when you are unconscious and asleep, crystal clear and lightning fast, parcels of Dakini cognition are being released into your mind. Quanta of Dakini cognition, if you want to put it that way. Signal bursts of enlightened Dakini cognition are continually popping into your mind like pinballs. And their velocity is a subliminal velocity. You don't notice them because they operate at a speed that exceeds the speed in which you can normally think. And there is a velocity of thinking, which is variable. This is a feature of the first attention. It operates at certain fixed velocities. But if you're in a stressful situation, for instance in a car accident or in a house fire, when you need to think more rapidly than usual, you may find yourself in the unfortunate situation where your first attention will collapse and you won't be able to think. That would be due to fear acting upon the first attention with a constricting effect. But if you're fortunate, as many people are, the predisposed fail-safe mechanism of the first attention would allow you to think faster and more efficiently than you could normally think. So we know from ordinary experiences that the velocity of the thought process can change. Generally speaking, however, the velocity of Dakini instruction operating within your mind, giving you access to the enlightened mind of Buddhahood all the time, is operating at a velocity that escapes you. This is the escape velocity of the pinball entering the console. Why do you need to learn each month? I don't say why do you need, that's bad language. Why would you want to learn? Why would you bother and take the time and effort to follow the Dakini shifts each month and to learn to detect the frequencies of these 16 different channels? Why would you do that? Simply because if you had a pinball machine that has a plunger device but no pockets and no turrets, it's not going to be a very interesting game. The pinball would be launched into the field of the machine, but it has no pockets to go to score, and it has no turrets or towers to bounce off to make it more interesting and to keep the velocity high. So what will happen is that the pinball will be launched into the console of the pinball machine, and it will just ricochet off one of the walls and lose its momentum very quickly and stop. And it will, if the console is tilted, as most pinball machines are, the ball will just roll to the bottom of the console and sit there inertly, and that is the way most people's minds work. That is the way the human mind works generically and universally until you plug it into the Shakti cluster. Then when you plug it into the Shakti cluster, you equip your neural linguistic circuits with a set of turrets and a set of pockets. And you are in the game of Dakini instruction. You need Dakini instruction just the way a pinball machine needs the turrets for the ball to ricochet off. You ricochet, your mind in its subliminal frequencies ricochets off Kurukula. It ricochets off Tara, the raffle green Tara, or it ricochets off Vajrayogini, or even Vivi. The ricochet factor is what keeps the Dakini frequency operating actively in your mind so that you have time to grasp it. If the Dakini frequencies don't have an internal neuro-linguistic structure to ricochet off, you will never capture them because they come and go too rapidly. Now, the velocity that the pinball reaches when it's being knocked and directed by the skillful player from one turret to another never equals the launch velocity that it has when it comes out of the plunger, obviously. So, it could, if you were really a very skillful player, you could bounce the pinball between the turrets in such a manner that it would achieve the release velocity of when it came out of the plunger. And that's when you have Dakini instruction as if it were the normal operation of your own mind. And then you don't have any other mind. Then you don't have a normal mind anymore. To be a Nahual operative with the Shakti cluster means that you don't have an ordinary mind anymore. You have the mind of the Dakinis. But in order to have it, you need to play pinball with the subliminal frequencies that they are continually bursting into your mind. So it's a pleasure to engage with these Dakini frequencies. It's a pleasure to listen for them, to recognize the instruction when it comes according to the Dakini it comes from, who never identifies herself, by the way. You have to acclimatize yourself to the impact. You know from the impact which Dakini it is. You know from the oral or audio signature. You know from the theme and tone. And you yourself must identify which one it is. This is part of the skill of Dakini pinball. So you can see that although it may be complicated may appear to be complicated and forbidding in certain ways. The structure of the Shakti cluster is a fantastic interactive gift. A gift from the wisdom goddess herself. She constructed the Shakti cluster. It's not the Turton who discovered it, did not construct it. It is her construction. It is an instrument of her mind implanted in the atmosphere of the earth in such a way that it simultaneously exists in the psychic and mental field of the human animal. She can do that, and she did. I don't know how long it took her to construct it, or how she went about the process. All I know is that in the summer of 2008, the Shakti cluster was ready for interactivity with human animals. And now, some 4 years later, I'm proud and happy to tell you that it works like a pinball machine, that you need the complexity, the apparent complexity of the 16 Dakini channels to handle the subliminal frequencies of enlightenment bursting in your own mind. I can also tell you with pride and confidence what exactly the planetary animal mother wants in her interactivity with the human animal. She wants the high precision and lavishness that she herself experiences as a planetary animal. Remember that the signature of a divine being, a god or aeon, is generosity rather than love, although love is certainly not lacking in the aeons. So, this invention, this fantastic contraption of the Shakti cluster is the gift of the wisdom goddess to humanity with the intention that those who are tuned to her can experience the precision and richness of her consciousness just as she herself experiences it.
8 Jobs.
How wonderful is that? Now, of course, no single human being could come anywhere close to encompassing the full scope of her awareness. But the potential of the Shakti cluster is nevertheless infinite for everyone who engages it. Infinite richness, infinite precision, infinite lavish comprehension of nature, of the human psyche, of biology, of the atmosphere, of the elementary chemistry of Earth, of the activities of the non-human kingdoms of plants, insects, reptiles, animals. All of this is what the planetary animal mother wants you to have and to know and love and enjoy. And what else is there to do on this planet if you're not caught in the trap of social conformity and in the insanity of the archons? What else would you rather do with your time than play pinball with the Dakinis?
8 Jobs.
You will find as you do so that although the Shakti cluster is the same for all of us, the way each one of us plays it is different. It's as if we were each playing on pinball machines whose construction of pockets and turrets matches our NLP. Now, I happen to play on a pinball machine that has a centrally located turret that transmits channel 1. So I do a lot of ricocheting off that turret. My mind, my psyche, my sensibility is geared to Mahakali, ferociously geared. And so, when I tend to play the pinball machine of the Shakti cluster, I'm engaging all 16 points of it, 16 points of structure, just like you are, but I tend to bounce pinball more frequently off some turrets than others. I mean, this is how it works. And it's the same with you. And you become conversant with your own enlightenment when you know which turrets of the pinball field your mind uses more frequently than others. And of course, that's how you identify your guardian. Your guardian in the Shakti cluster, and everyone in planetary Tantra has a specific guardian in the Shakti cluster, can be compared to the tower or turret you use to keep up the velocity of the pinball to its highest level. But you can bounce the pinball off any turret you like. So I hope this analogy is helpful. I think it's pretty amusing. I really like it myself. And I'm delighted that I came up with it, actually. And I guess I should add in conclusion that to be consistent in the metaphor, or the analogy, rather, to be consistent with this analogy, I would have to assign some significance to the pockets. Well, what are the pockets? Well, those are the deposits, the place where Dakini transmission becomes permanently deposited in your psyche. You see? Now, if you have Matangi as your guide, as many of you do, many of you coming into planetary Tantra have the great fortune of having Matangi as your guardian, then you will deposit or register instructions from Matangi each time that the pinball frequencies of your mind hit the turret that corresponds to Matangi. So say that you're playing a round of pinball, you're in Dakini instruction, you're bouncing the ball off the Dakini, off the Matangi turret over and over again. Bingo, the machine is ringing. Bingo, you're scoring insights. And then finally it bounces off the Matangi tower into a pocket. There you do register and retain for recall in ordinary consciousness the insights that you acquired by that session of pinball. Dakini instruction occurs in an altered state of subliminal thinking, which the Tibetans call pristine cognition. That is thinking that cannot be elaborated. It arrives in a pristine and fully elaborated condition. It is difficult to retain this Dakini instruction in your ordinary state of mind. However, you can integrate it if you hold it in the mental process over and over again. This is equivalent to gently moving the pinball machine between the palms of your hands, gently urging it now and then with your hip, so that the pinball bounces again and again off your preferred turrets. And finally, when it goes into a pocket, you retain the instruction that you received. So there it is. There's my analogy of Dakini pinball. And of course, the last comment I would make is, a skillful player doesn't tilt the machine. You don't force any of this. You don't hit the console too hard with the palm of your hand or your hip, because then the game stops and the big sign comes on the upper panel in red lettering, TILT. Don't tilt your mind when you're playing Dakini pinball. Don't force cognitive and intellectual conceptions into the process. Let it reveal itself. Don't go rational. Don't try to control it. Let it reveal itself in the spontaneous and emergent play of the enlightened content of your own mind, which is actually the only mind you really have, even though it isn't yours. And on that comment, I'll leave you to the game. Looking forward to the next opportunity to speak to you in a Navigator briefing. Safe passage to all.
Ah, me mateys. X marks the spot. There be treasure.